Organising from Below: What the British Left Could Learn from Nicaraguan Social Movements. Written and recorded by Rohan Rice. From 26 October to 4th November 2022, Marlon Sanchez and Erica Takeo from the Nicaraguan Rural Workers Association, also known as the ATC, visited the UK on a speaker tour organised by the Nicaraguan Solidarity Campaign. Founded in 1978, the ATC was one of the popular organisations that supported the Sandinista Front, also known as the FSLN, that overthrew the Somoza dictatorship in 1979. I spoke to Marlon and Erica about lessons that the UK left could learn about the critical role that social movements such as the ATC have played in developing socialism, particularly during the neoliberal period from 1990 to 2006. In case anyone was in doubt, the British Labour Party's current leader, Keir Starmer, made it very clear in his latest conference speech that Labour were no longer a party of the left, not even tangentially. "We can be a reforming party," he declared. "We are the party of the centre ground." That has been evident to many for a long time, but at least now it is in black and white. Where, at a time like this, can the British left turn to for guidance? Successful socialist revolutions are a good place to start. Movements which are currently building socialism from the bottom up are even better. In this vein, where better to take inspiration from than Nicaragua? After breaking from capitalist imperialism with the 1979 Sandinista Revolution, and then again at the ballot box in 2006, ushering in the second stage of socialist development, left movements in Nicaragua have plenty to teach us about building and sustaining revolutionary praxis. Yet what of the interregnum period between these two socialist phases? Following the brutal US-backed Contra War against the Sandinistas throughout the 1980s, a multi-party neoliberal government, supported by the US, was victorious in the 1990 election. 16 years of successive capitalist governments preceded. This phase of neoliberalism is equally as important to study for leftists as the revolutionary periods. It is a masterclass in popular resistance and political hope during an era that could have been marked by depression, retreat, and apathy. Nicaragua's neoliberal period shows the absolute necessity of sustaining strong social movements outside the pantomime of party politics. The ATC is an example of one such movement, one that has physically and politically fought for land justice, defended the rights of agricultural workers, built agroecological training schools, co-founded La Via Campesina, the global movement of peasants and indigenous peoples, campaigned for food sovereignty, and defended all of this and more for over 40 years. That is to say, before, during, and in between periods of FSLN governance. Land rights came up again and again during my discussions with Marlon Sanchez, the director of Yala Ichemoleu, an agroecological training school run by the ATC for Latin American students. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, neoliberal organisations made desperate attempts to reverse the land reforms implemented by the FSLN during that first phase of the revolution. These land reforms were perhaps the proudest achievements of the ATC and Sandinista government. Nicaragua had always been an agricultural economy. Therefore, land reform that empowered the peasants represented a monumental systemic shift. As part of the revolution, 40,000 agricultural workers undertook mass land occupations, refusing to vacate unless they were granted land titles. In total, approximately 110,000 land titles were granted to peasants during the first phase of the revolution from 1979 to 1990. Former plantation owners, many of whom supported the Somoza dictatorship, were aggrieved at the development of democratic land rights. So when the opportunity came during the neoliberal period to recover old lands, they quickly mobilized. However, ATC members, and predominantly women members who had the most to lose from the ascendancy of patriarchal capitalism, came out in force to defend their territories. They led lengthy, highly effective shutdowns of main roads to combat the attempted forced evictions. Sanchez also remarks that, quote, "During the period of neoliberalism, cooperativism in the agricultural sector boomed. There was no government support for the co-ops. and yes, they could be quite individualized, but they were productive and this helped to prevent evictions." End quote. It is another example of how Nicaragua's popular movements have prophetically been the protagonists of change. Since 2006, the FSLN has passed various pieces of legislation to protect small farmers and financially support rural development, including cooperatives and the family economy. When I specifically asked Sanchez how the ATC survived during the 16 years of neoliberalism, she told me that they, quote, had a clear program and structure. At a youth level and above, the agrarian reform was ours to defend. In fact, the 16 years of neoliberal governance became our most active period because peasants were sidelined. End quote. The ATC had to struggle on multiple fronts. Quote, "We focused on workers' rights, which were under attack, and those of migrants, and of course all the basics that affected us day to day, health, education, food costs." End quote. Looking outwards was another essential component to their endurance. Quote, "We supported other social movements in bringing a change of government. We all understood that only a left government, in our case the FSLN, would fight for our interests. Coordination with La Via Campesina was also important. We knew we had to fight at an international level, as these issues obviously did not just exist only in Nicaragua." End quote. As such, the ATC supported La Via Campesina in building a global network of agroecological schools, at the behest of Paulo Freire and former Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez, representing ALBA, the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America, that would provide political, ideological, and technical training to their students. The ATC's internationalism has not meant embracing Western capitalism and corporate control of agriculture. 200 years of attempted US imperialist interventions in Nicaragua has made the ATC, and many Sandinistas, ultra-wary of NGO support from the US. Erica Takeo, who is on the International Secretariat of the ATC, told me that, quote, "The ATC rejected NGO takeovers that happened during the neoliberal period, in Nicaragua and globally. It was obvious that many of these NGOs were funded by the US as proxies to intervene in the country, which the US had been trying to do for a long time." End quote. This proved particularly true in 2018, during the failed coup d'etat, when the US government funded NGOs helped to manufacture fake news about protests that led to the coup attempt. The ATC has been fundamental in developing and maintaining Nicaragua's socialistic society. The movement is a shining example of the need for leftists globally to strengthen their social organizations from below, regardless of their national party politics. Which brings us back to the British Labour Party. A centrist party of capitalist imperialism, they never have, and never will, represent the majority of Britain's most exploited people. Ultimately, governments are always transient, and it will be social organisations and movements that persistently represent the interests of the working class. As Sanchez said, quote, "For us, and many other unions in Nicaragua, it is not a question of whether the party we want is in power or not. Our work continues." End quote. A poorly edited version of this article first featured in the Morning Star newspaper in November 2022. What you just listened to was my original, unedited copy.